Okay, let's now work on the main component of the headlights. So select this rim, then duplicate this edge loop here into a new part by separating the selection. Then you want to extrude it, scale it down a tiny bit, and remove it from the shrink wrapped group. We're now going to shade it smooth, and then we want to extrude it to create a kind of housing for the components again this time, but we'll make it chrome. So you can see me playing with the length here, but we need to just make it much longer than that, just like this. So scale it down about here. Add loop cut, and you can just scale it up a tiny bit so it's not as much shaped like a cone. Now turn on auto merge if you didn't, and just merge some vertices that I had that merged automatically. This could have caused some issues, so that's why you want to ideally not work with auto merge on unless you really need it. So let's just fill that. Pretty basic. A little material compilation from Eevee. I'm just going to move this up here because we added an edge loop. We kind of destroyed the curvature that we had before, so we need to remove them. Okay. Now selecting this rim, I will give it a black plastic material, and the rest using Ctrl I will give it a chrome material. Just like that. And we can tweak this a bit more by duplicating this and then into a new object. Let me just try to find it. Okay, sorry for that color change. I had some problems outside of the video. Now select this edge here, this loop, duplicate it, and then separate by selection. Then what you want to do is remove it, dissolve this vertex, just like that, and we can add a face here and a loop cut, then remove them all from the vertex group that is shrink wrapped. Then we can fill this area just like that. Inset it, so we have this face here, and move it on the y-axis towards the front. Move this here so it's not as pinched. Then slide this over here to keep that corner sharp, but not this one. All right, let's shade this smooth, and then move this one here to get rid of that valley that we had. Now for the materials, we want to use a solidify modifier without only rim checked, and then we're going to give it a glass material, ideally pure white. You can reuse the same one as before, it doesn't really matter. And then you know the drill, just material offset to 1 and a plastic material in the third slot. Then add loop cut here so that the plastic rim isn't as big. And we're going to assign the second glass material to it, just like that. It won't be visible in like distant shot, but in close-ups it can be very useful. So let me hide those lights that I had before. I worked on it on the environment a tiny bit outside of camera. That's why. Okay, so selecting this loop, what you want to do is scale it down a tiny bit, and then select that loop, duplicate it into a new object. Now work on that loop. You're going to extrude it and then scale it up a tiny bit, and then extrude it back to create kind of a rim. A ring, yeah. And then extrude that on the y-axis, just like this, then extrude it again, and then move it to create another housing. Just like this, fill this area up. And give it a chrome material. and shade it smooth, just like this. Now that's great. Just want to check if it looks better without the chrome on that trim piece. Okay, now working on that housing that we made before. Duplicate that rim, yes, again. Then scale it down a tiny bit. And we'll just slide those two together around here. Connect them together and create those at an angle and delete the vertices to the right. Then add loop cuts to sharpen that corner, both at the top and the bottom that you're going to need to do this. Just like that. And then extrude it and scale it down. Extrude it on the y-axis, just a tiny bit. Then create this shape by extruding it and then scale it again. Shade it smooth, just like that. And then what you want to do is fill this area. Add loop cuts if needed. Doesn't need to be pretty. It won't be very visible in the final render anyway. So, okay, that's done. So for those parts, let's just turn off auto merge to be sure no accidents happen. And then we're going to look up on Blender Kit for materials and tap car light in the search bar and find one of those. I will use the triangular bump one. And then we're going to go into those material property. And if the person did its job correctly, we could have already scaled it down, but we need to add a mapping node in texture coordinate with Control T if you have Node Wrangler add-on enabled, and then just plug it into the socket of each image texture, and we can adjust the scale from there. So I don't want all of it to be this bumpy texture, so I will create a new material slot with those faces and then add a regular chrome material and remove that material offset if it caused any problem for you. And you can play with the normal strength of the texture if you want it to be more or less visible. Just going to tighten this edge right here and then separate it into a new object, then scale it down, extrude it, flip the normals if needed, then we want to extrude it again, scale it down, and guess what? We're going to fill this area. And you can see it's pretty ugly, so I will rework it. Trying to distance it a tiny bit. Doesn't need to be super pretty, but let's just move those away from each other. So it doesn't cause any pinching. Just move this here. So you can use the smooth vertices like I did here a few times just to make them smoother, basically. It will distance them and just relax those vertices. So create a new glass material and we want to assign it to it. Okay, now add a wave texture and then you want to add a bump node. Then with Control A and just clicking on the node, Control Shift, sorry. Clicking on the node, you can preview what it looks like. And I'll just scale it down a tiny bit and then rotate it. plug that into the height and then the normal of the socket over here. And let's preview what it looks like. You can see that we have a beautiful wavy glass, just like that. You can play with the strength, but keep in mind that the more bumps you have, the less transparent it will look like. So, duplicate this rim around here on the housing, and then selecting it, we will go into edit mode, slide this over here until it meets the other part that we created, delete the vertices on the left this time, and we're going to repeat this process. So extrude, scale, tighten those corners, move those over here, and then a loop cut there, and another one at the bottom, just like this. So extrude it, scale it down tiny bit, just like this. Then extrude it on the y-axis, not too much, or else you will just bump into the housing. Do the same for the inner loop. And this time I want to make a very sharp corner and make it very shallow, because it won't be glass for this one. I'll just tighten this up here and fill in that area. Just like this. Perfect. Now select the bottom ones and pull them back in so it aligns with the other one. And then with that loop, press Ctrl plus, and we're going to scale it down or up depending on what you need to, and shade it smooth. Just to be sure. Okay, select that inner loop, and let's just slide it a tiny bit by scaling it down. Just like that. Let's move that in so it fills nicely. Let's move those vertices up so that it follows the contour of the housing. Okay, let's remove its material and then add a black plastic one to it. And then select the faces that consist of the middle of that part. So for me it was those 6 faces. And then I will create a new material slot. And then what we want to do is create kind of a textured plastic. Set the solidify, set the solidify to only rim and then remove that material offset. And now we can assign that new material to it. And duplicate that material just to be sure you don't edit all the other plastic materials that we had before. So we want to add this is the node group, make sure to duplicate it as well. And inside of it, by pressing tab, we want to add a wave texture again with its own texture map coordinate. Then adjust the scale until you like it. I will make it relatively big so they're visible here, and then rotate them until you like the angle. Now let me play with the scale a tiny bit more, and then select the bump node and just duplicate it using Shift D, and duplicate that mix RGB as well. Plug that normal into the other socket and the height of the bump node. Then you can preview this and see how it looks like. It may take a few minutes or seconds depending on your hardware. So you want to play with the bump strength. You can also play with the mix factor if you want more of the plastic or of the wave. Yeah, ideally you should play with distance, but honestly I didn't see much difference, so just pick the ones that make the best results for you. So that looks pretty good to me. We can now just continue tweaking it a tiny bit more. So for that glass, I will darken it just a tiny bit. And then for this one, I want to add a color ramp and plug that into the color. So instead of black, you want a relatively light gray, and then you can preview what it looks like. So you should have bands that are lighter and bands that are darker to like make this transition more apparent. Instead of using bumps, we can use color and bumps combined. Just like that. You can also make this black instead of chrome. For this last part, I will just continue tweaking the materials, trying different combinations. For example, I will just excuse me. I will duplicate one icosphere from here and just place it in the center. You can make it bigger to make it more apparent. And then I will remove its emissive ability, just like that, just as an extra detail in the back. Okay, we can now make our glass layer apparent over here, and we can rename our objects. Very important, as we all know. I'm just going to play around with the camera, see what angles look good, what others could be improved, if we see the internals well enough or not. So I think we went a bit too far with the black, and I'll switch this to a chrome material again, just to have this edge around here. And for the glass, I'll just make this even lighter, just like that. So it's pretty much done for now. I'm pretty happy with how they turned out, but I'll just tweak them a bit more. So if you're happy with yours, you can just leave the video now and continue on to the next part, or you can just continue tweaking your materials, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.